Hi guys, it's the breakdown, and we have a very, very special guest for us, an all black icon, Mr. Mills Muliaina with us. How does it feel to be on the hottest rugby podcast in the world?
Well, I'm feeling pretty hot at the moment seeing you guys there. So thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to answering some questions and I suppose giving you an insight about where we're at and, here in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Let's just start with what it means to be an All Black and what does it mean to do the hacker. That's a good way to start.
Well, it's awesome. I think it's here in New Zealand, it's something that's a little bit different. It's every sort of Kiwi boy's dream to become an All Black. And often, hack is a really special thing. So when you become an All Black and you get that first jersey for the very first time, or you come into the environment and you're seeing everyone else that sort of made the team, it's a special emotional moment. And it's not until you get that first cap under your belt that you really feel that you're an All Black. The haka practicing during the week is obviously a big thing because as kids, we all love doing the haka. So it's a very special thing.
Cool. Yeah. And what did you feel after winning the World Cup with the game being so close?
Oh, well, man, it was fantastic. I was injured. I was in the stands with Dan Carter, and I think even though we're both injured, we still ended up jumping up and down as much as we could, given our injuries, and sort of hugged. I think because of the fact that we'd come so far, like 2003 when we first started, we lost in 2003, 2007 was an absolute battle. We lost in the quarterfinals, and to get to 2011, throughout those years, would come a long way. We didn't play the best. We probably didn't deserve to win on the day in terms of the how we played, but certainly I think the adversity that the guys had faced throughout those sort of eight or so years certainly got us over the line to use a rugby.
Going on to it, who's probably your favorite player and what's your favorite jersey swap? Have you ever swapped a jersey of a player and like framed it in your house or something like that?
It's crazy. My era was always sort of growing up with watching the Springboks and guys a little bit earlier, and it was probably my favorite jersey swap was Percy Montgomery in South Africa. It was just special because here's a guy that I was sort of watching on TV, and he wanted to swap jerseys with you. And I went on and I swapped probably about 3 or 4 with him in the end, but I think Percy was always pretty good because one, he was a pretty boy, good-looking man, and two, he was a fantastic player, and the way he sort of went about, kicking goals and things like that, he was fantastic person.
If there was one player today, who would you want to swap jerseys with?
One player today that I'd want to swap jerseys with. That's a tough question. There's so many. I think if I looked at, I'd love to probably someone in Johnny Sexton. I think, the way that he's been going, he's been around for a very long time. Someone like, I think there's many players, I'd have to say. But yeah, probably him at the moment. Yeah, just off the top of my head.
Good choice.
Yeah, shifting the focus more towards modern rugby with the World Cup coming up this year, later on this year. As a New Zealander, how do you feel the All Blacks' chances are at this World Cup? And this whole narrative about New Zealand being underdogs, would you still see yourselves as the favourites?
There's no way we're the favourites. You guys know that. We've struggled over the last, probably year or so we used to come into to Rugby World Cups, being at the height of in terms of winning games. We haven't done that convincingly in the last couple of years, which I think is a good thing. So we are the underdogs. And if you look at the quality of the teams that are around, man, anyone can win this Rugby World Cup. I'm really looking forward to it because there's some class teams. Do I believe we can win it? Absolutely. I think we've got the players. I think we've got the X Factor players. I think we've got the talent to be able to rock up to France and beat any team. The one thing I would question is, that I would sort of, I'm hoping that they get together as their game plan and what sort of style they're going to play. Often in the past, have sort of, we've known what sort of style that we wanted to play, but having lost a few test matches these last couple of years and COVID and whatever not, I think we've lost our way a little bit in terms of the coaching in which we want to play the game. And you've seen already, the Northern Hemisphere France and particularly Ireland, they've led the way. And so, for us, really, we need to, one, come up with a game plan, and two, all get on the same page, because I certainly think we've got the talent.
What does that game plan look like?
Well, traditionally we've been, a team that throws the ball around in a I suppose, constructive way. We've probably gone away from that a little bit, in terms of keeping, getting into structure and things like that, and not so much sort of, they often say play what's in front of you, using our sort of explosiveness and the freedom that we've had, that we do here in New Zealand, is throw the ball around in the backyard. As we've grown up as little kids. We've still got to get the set piece right. So we've kind of gone a little bit towards trying to dominate the set piece, given what's happened across the globe on the other side of the world. So I think there's a real balance of that. Our athletes, I still believe, are the best athletes that we've got in world rugby. From when you've got even the lower jerseys, the skill set that we must come up with, or have had in the past, has been awesome. And so we've just got to get a balance right. Yes, we know the set piece is really important, but I think the style, that the All Black style, has always been to be a little bit flamboyant, not too loose. But I think we've certainly sort of gone the other way in terms of the structure we played, and that's probably the back end from where things have started way back when I was still playing. The structure that you get into, and it's often filtered down to our schoolboy rugby. And kind of lost that way, that freedom to be able to say, well, hey, here's an opportunity. Maybe I won't stick to structure and go out of the structure, and hopefully everyone adapts, and hopefully, come the Rugby World Cup, we'll all be on the same page.
I think watching that game versus England last year, I think whilst the structure was a concern for the large part, I think we were starting to see what New Zealand could potentially do, I think, from an attacking perspective at the next World Cup. I think particularly looking at that try Riku Ioane scored, I believe it was off a cross kick from Bowden Barrett. Geordie Barrett coming into 12, and that combo between Geordie Barrett and Riku Ioane, I think that added an edge to New Zealand that they didn't have at the start of the Rugby Championship last year.
Totally agree. And you see a lot of that in Super Rugby. Like, a lot of our Super Rugby players and teams would often do magical things like that, but the skill set's got to be higher when you go to test match, because you don't pull it off, and the consequence is massive. In Super Rugby, you've got, it might come off, it might not come off, but you got the following week, or you got the next thing, that because you haven't got world-class players in a test environment, there might be another opportunity. In test matches, you never get another opportunity, so you've got to nail it on the head. So there's the stuff like pressure. Can I execute? How do you practice pressure and execute at the same time? When you're at Twickenham and there's 100 or 200, whatever thousand people there, and you've got to, you're fatigued, you've got to hit the nail on the head and then take that opportunity. So I suppose it goes into what I was saying before. We've always had the flamboyancy of being able to play and see and try and execute that. Can we take some of that into test match rugby? And you've just said it. We can do it. Can we do it though? And then knuckle down and go, hey, okay, we've just won that big moment. Now's the time to really try and win another big moment after that. And that's probably where we lost our way in that Twickenham test. I turned the TV off after that, because I was thinking, man, we're going to blow them away. And then I sort of get back on. It was a draw. So it's that's where it can get a little bit loose, because then the focus is, man, we're scoring from everywhere. We're all over them. Whereas in test matches, you can't afford to do that, because there's so many quality players that they'll come back, and if you give them an opportunity where it's be a lapse of concentration, teams will take it.
Yeah. It's interesting when we talk about these players that have the high skill level. And I think that I personally, when I look at certain teams, I look at a certain player that's gonna produce a match-winning moment. Like France have Dupont, Ireland have Sexton. You can think of anyone. Like, for you, when you watch the All Blacks, who is that player?
Oh, well, you know what? Lately, since he's come back, he has given me real comfort that he's going to be on the job. Two, he's signed up for another 4 years for New Zealand rugby. Where he plays during the Rugby World Cup, who knows? But he's definitely going to be a starter, and that's going to have to be Will Jordan. I think, man, he's an incredible player. He's fast, he's hard, he's gone through a lot in terms of his injuries. He's back, but I love the way he's come back, and like it's if he hasn't missed a beat. Like he's been out for, man, almost a year, maybe I think nine months or so, and he's just come back and he's really effective. He's picked up a passing game and a long passing game. You would have seen, I think it was the second game he was back from. He threw a really nice ball over the top, running at speed. And I haven't seen that from Will Jordan, but he's got X factor. And, the try that he scored against Ireland in Wellington, where he was free, you kind of don't realize how fast he actually runs until you're out there. And when he puts the foot down, man, he's at another level. So I think it's going to be him. Fingers crossed he stays fit, and the coaches are going to have a big headache picking where he's going to play, because in my mind he starts all day, every day, wherever that might be, on the wing or even that fullback.
What about the likes of Damien Mckenzie? What's his importance? Obviously, there's a lot of talk about Will Jordan, Damien Mckenzie coming back. A lot of people saying he could be the starting 10. What do you think about that?
This is the crazy part, and it probably goes on to the stuff that I've already mentioned about the flamboyancy. Like Damien, man, he's awesome. He's world class, and the way he's playing, he's unpredictable. You don't actually quite know. Traditionally, we've had in the past 10s that have been fantastic, and they've got the balance right because there's X factor, but then there's also that structural play when hey, we've won a big moment. Now it's time to sort of knuckle down for the next 5 or so minutes, or even less than that, and just keep the momentum building. With Damien, you don't quite know, because pressure will come on and you'll go backwards, and then all of a sudden he'll create a hole or create something or nothing, or he will go backwards and someone will tackle him way behind the game line. The Chiefs have got it down packed. They understand his style, so they understand the way he plays. They understand that he will go backwards. When things aren't going forward, that there's still an opportunity. So they've kind of adapted in the way the style that they've played around Damien. He has got a really good kicking game, but I think it's that whole balance once again. When you see him, that's exactly what your backyard kid in New Zealand does. They want to play around. They just want to run at 100 miles per hour. Yeah. But again, when you get to Test match rugby and you've got world class players that you're playing against, they understand that. You can get away with little things at Super Rugby level. I think Damien's thereabouts. I don't think he's our starter. I think he comes off the bench and probably creates something a little bit different. Or you rock into the World Cup in my mind and see how Mo'unga plays, and he could be our trick card. I think now that we know how he plays, I think there's a lot of players around him that understands that. But again, do they understand it enough around our game plan that the All Black coaches are going to implement? Because you only get one shot, and when it comes to knockout football, and then I've been there when we've lost against the French team in the quarterfinals. If you don't quite get it right, you're out. You're going home, and so that's something that the All Black coaches are going to have to consider. He's world class, but if I was picking a team, I'd love to see him come off the bench and just bring something different when things aren't quite going well, or you're throwing everything at it, chasing game, or you're finishing things off because there's a bit less pressure on the team to have this state in that structure.
Sort of like a Bowden Barrett in 2015 kind of role is what I see him playing. Totally agree
with probably a little bit more X factor, like Bodie in 2015 when he came on, he provided that. Just that speed and acceleration. I suppose the energy off the bench always sort of helps. With Damien, he brings unpredictability, right? So even if your 10 isn't going quite well, he comes on and he brings that spark. But the guys have to adapt. If you're up by a bit, then you bring him back on. He's still going to bring that energy, but he's now going to have a bit more freedom. To finish the game off. So absolutely, certainly similar to what Bowden did in 2015. In terms of Damien, I think he's a lot more dangerous in terms of what he can do when he's on song.
I think Damien Mckenzie has a very good case to start, so I'm gonna have to slightly disagree. I think looking at the Chiefs' trajectory this season, obviously the number one team in the league, And he gives me, I think he's an 80-minute player. I think I look at him and I look like a Finn Russell sort of player, and I think he starts and he sets the intensity. And I'm not sure whether that's something, whether he could impact the game as well as he could coming off the bench, in comparison to him starting. And I do think that he has been better than Bodie and Mwanga for me. I just think the only thing they have over him is probably experience. But that's my opinion, yeah.
Look at and say, if you're sort of like playing against a South Africa team and you want to make it as messy as possible, to try and disrupt their 4-pack, move them around a lot more, is Damien Mckenzie more suited to that kind of role and playing unstructured? Is that the way to combat like a team like South Africa?
Well, it is, but it isn't. And again, I come back to my point. You're right. He is our best 10 at the moment in Super Rugby. You know, he's in the form of his life. I would have to say the way he's going about the team. He played fullback last week, perhaps to take that little bit of probably got a little bit loose in that kicking game, and that probably was a little bit evident when they played the Hurricanes, under strength Hurricanes team. The structure wasn't quite there, but again, what was on his side is the Chiefs. They have adapted their style to suit Damien Mckenzie. Now, when you're in the All Blacks, you've got world-class players again. Not only are you against world-class players, but there's world-class players in your team. And so what's the balance look like in terms of the coaching? Do you evolve your game around Damien Mckenzie, or are there some other aspects in the game that you think, man, we've got key players here and here. Collectively, we can be we can be stronger if we did it this way, as opposed to focusing on one player. And that's where I think, the flamboyancy has probably gone too much when you put Damien there, 80-minute player, because you go into a test match, it's high pressure. You've got great athletes around you. You've got to stick, to those. They always say the processes. Stick to the process. Stick to what we're looking to go and do. You've got to be on the same page, as opposed to 15 guys on one, 14 guys on one page, and then he tries something a little bit different. And I think that's where he's probably going to be a little bit more effective coming off the bench, in terms of the adaptability around the guys that he comes on and says, "Oh, here's Damien. Okay, we're going to lift in intensity, but we might get scattery." So we're okay with it, because we now know that, as opposed to starting and saying, "Well, we're going to be scattery the whole game," and then to try and bring it back. You can't afford that in Test match rugby.
Moving towards more of a Northern Hemisphere topic, obviously, I believe Ireland are going to go win the World Cup this year. I think a lot of people have agreed, a lot of people have disagreed, including Taddy over there mainly.
Yeah.
Do you believe in the Irish hype, or do you think they've peaked too early?
You've got to believe in the hype. You absolutely do have to believe in it. I mean, look what they've done. They came down to New Zealand. They've convincingly beaten 2 test matches. Well, actually, the third one was probably the best one. The way they've gone about 6 Nations, Grand Slam. Absolutely, you've got to. They are going to be a massive threat, but so is the host nation. This is where I think we're in a really good position. We don't have the burden of it going to the Rugby World Cup. I think we've got more to play for, because of the way we haven't been as consistent in the last couple of years. When you look at the Irish side, they look strong, but they even look mentally strong. Like the skill set that they're actually producing and the way they're going about their game plan. And when I talked about before, guys being on the same page, they are looking good. The style that they're playing suits them. You got some big boys up front, and defensively, they're really sound. So again, I'd have to say they deserve going in there as favourites. They've shown that. But World Cups seem to do funny things, and they have done funny things for us guys here down in New Zealand. Anyone could win this. Anyone could win this.
Do you think they're going to break the curse of the quarterfinals?
No.
Well, I mean, who do they face? It's either South Africa. It's either or New Zealand, right? For us. So, well, if they're playing the All Blacks, they won't go through, in my mind.
He's throwing shade.
I'm not going to sit here and go, the Irish are going to beat the All Blacks if they play. That'll just be silly. But again, that quarterfinal, that pool A and B, and out of that, there's going to be there's two top sides that are going to be knocked out come the finals. And, I like I said, I think we've got the team to be able to do it. South Africa. I mean, even if we meet South Africa, I mean, what does that look like? It's just mouthwatering, isn't it? Just to think, whoever comes out of those pools, they're effectively gone. After that. So, I'm just hopeful that we get to the quarterfinals and we're starting to hit our straps, and then one of those other teams, either South Africa or the Irish, who were favourites. And that's the other thing too. I mean, you've got to remember they've never done this. They've never gone into a Rugby World Cup as favourites, and pressure does a lot of things. I've just mentioned it before. It absolutely does. When you've got the weight on your shoulders, Ireland's just up the road, so they're going to have plenty of support. They've been successful. What does that look like when everyone else is gunning for them? We've had that for years, year in, year out, where every time you go out in that field, it's been sometimes a burden for us, but also we've sort of turned it around and made it exciting. We've embraced the fact that everyone wants to be at their best against the All Blacks and to get excited by that. The Irish, I don't think, have had that. They haven't had that feeling before, so that'll test them come quarterfinal time.
Two things. I think if you guys face us, the Springboks, you won't beat us. That's 1 point. Second point, I think Ireland. I don't believe the hype in Ireland from the perspective that the history, I think, plays a massive, massive, massive role in World Cups. And I think, I'm not sure, I just wanted to get your perspective on this. The URC loss, I think 12, 13 Irish players playing, capitulating at the highest moment, the most pressure on them. I know obviously they won the Grand Slam, but surely that shows that in high pressure moments they can crumble. That Irish cohort.
Absolutely, and that's what I mean. Like, we don't often we factor in what we see in them performing at a lower level, but the pressure of the expectation to win is massive. And the All Blacks have faced that forever. That's forever been the case for us. We've had to learn a lot about how to embrace that pressure, because, man, there's nothing like it. So they'll have to go into that knowing fully well that that's going to be there. What does it look like? Well, they haven't experienced it, and that's the biggest thing, is that you need experience to be able to face that pressure. Has the All Blacks, this current All Blacks team been through that? Yes and no, but I think they're more hungry because everyone's sort of saying, well, there's the Irish here. We can roll into this thinking, man, we effectively not so much got nothing to lose, but everything to play for. Whereas in the past, we've rocked up there and the expectation, they always say, well, it's not there. It is there. Regardless of what the Irish will say, it is there. History will say it's there. And that's probably the one thing. It's probably not the skill on the field, it's off the field in terms of mentally. How will they cope with that? Because, as I said, everyone would be vying to try and beat them. And I know a lot of the Irish players did play in that final. It's probably a little bit different in terms of sort of what happened, but and what will happen with a different team. But it's definitely a factor. There's no doubt about it. It is definitely a factor. That pressure will make you make decisions that you wouldn't have made in the past.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about this podcast is how different we see rugby. Like, for example, Kieran, he thinks Ireland are like the real deal. They're winning the World Cup. Taddy thinks they're just going to flop. Like, he's questioning whether they're making it out the group stages. Like, me personally, I'm on the fence about them because I see what they've done. Like, the players that they have, very good players. I'm a big fan of a lot of their players, but I think they don't have the best players in the world. Like New Zealand or France does. But what they do have is coaches that know exactly what they're doing, and players that know their role completely, like, perfectly well. But I don't think they have that individual. They have some good individuals, but not players that are world beaters, in my opinion.
They've got World Player of the Year though. They've got Josh van der Fleer, World Player of the Year. And what more do you want from a back row? I think winning a World Cup, you look at Richie McCaw being a great example. It comes from the back row. It comes from the leadership. And I think Josh van der Fleer is becoming a leader in the Ireland pack. And he's a phenomenal at the breakdown. I think he's going to be that kind of Richie McCaw role for Ireland this World Cup.
I think you're right, Ryan. This is what I'm talking about. Like in my mind, we've got X factor players right across the board, right?
Yeah.
And probably more so than the Irish team. But the difference is the Irish know how they're going to play. They're all on the same page. We just, from our side of things, in terms of the All Blacks, that's the thing. That's the question. I'm hoping they get right, is that all these X factor players come together and they understand their role and what game plan we're playing with. When we go to the Rugby World Cup, the Irish have got it down packed. They might not have as many X factor players as what we have, but game plan and being on the same page speaks a lot more than just individual players.
Moving on to the other side of the draw, obviously you've got Australia being one of the favourites on this side. What do you think about their chances with Eddie? Where do you see them lying at the moment? What's their what's the status with Australia?
Oh man, they're going to be good. Don't get me wrong. I think they're coming in nicely under the radar. They've got some good players. I mean, Super Rugby, they're sort of spread out. They probably needed, but when they come together, their team is awesome. Eddie Jones brings another factor because he gets results straight away. In a short period of time, he gets results. So, man, I think Australia are going to be, they'll be good. That other side of the jaw, whilst it may seem a little bit easier. I mean, England, Japan or Samoa, even Wales and Fiji, who comes out of that, the Australian side? Like, I think Fiji are looking pretty good. Yeah, I agree. I think Fiji might come through, but Australia, they are the dark horse, and I think they come into this tournament, while under the radar. They're going to be a big three.